The case seemed closed, but the courtroom fell silent when the attorney revealed who entered the room. Tyrone Johnson, a 17-year-old black teenager, sat on the defendant's bench, handcuffed, facing a system that seemed to have decided his fate. Even before the trial began, Officers Peterson and Mitchell exchanged confident smiles, while the judge, a man with a cold stare, cleared his throat before starting the proceedings. But at that moment, the courtroom door swung open with a bang. A tall man with a firm posture entered. His gaze swept across the room, and the smiles disappeared from the officers' faces. That was Anthony Johnson, former police captain and Tyrone's father. And he wasn't there to watch the trial, he was there to change its course. Prosecutor Dr. Claire Foster adjusted her glasses on her thin nose and glanced quickly at the officers, who now seemed uncomfortable. She had built the case exclusively on their testimonies, without questioning the veracity of the accusations against Tyrone, a black kid from the projects, with a clean record and exemplary grades at the public high school where he studied, accused of carrying a stolen wallet. The story sounded all too familiar, but she preferred not to dig deeper. 3 days earlier, Tyrone was returning home after basketball practice when he was stopped by Peterson and Mitchell. With intimidating looks, they searched his backpack and found a brown leather wallet, identical to one that had been stolen from a local businessman at the Westfield Mall. Tyrone tried to argue but was immobilized, handcuffed, and thrown into the patrol car. This wasn't the first time he had been stopped without reason, but now they were trying to destroy him. At the precinct, they offered him a deal: confess and get a reduced sentence. He refused. Even though he was afraid, he knew he couldn't admit to something he didn't do. "Let's begin," said Judge Maxwell Harrison, lightly tapping his gavel. Case number 47298, State versus Tyrone Johnson, charged with theft and receiving stolen property. How does the defendant plead? Before the public defender could answer, Anthony walked to the defense table. "Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm Anthony Johnson, the defendant's father and an attorney licensed with the State Bar. I request permission to take over my son's defense." The judge frowned, visibly annoyed by the interruption. "Are you aware that we're about to begin the hearing? This substitution should have been requested in advance." "I'm aware, Your Honor, but exceptional circumstances prevented me from doing so. I have here a signed power of attorney and my bar card. I ask for the court's understanding." After a few moments of hesitation, the judge nodded. "Very well. Mr. Johnson, how does your client plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor, completely innocent." The prosecutor smiled discreetly. It was always the same answer, even when the evidence was irrefutable. "The prosecution may present its opening statement," ordered the judge. Dr. Foster rose with the elegant posture that characterized her. "Your Honor, the state presents a clear case against the defendant, Tyrone Johnson. On March 15th, police officers Peterson and Mitchell were conducting routine patrol in the Lincoln Heights area when they spotted the defendant behaving suspiciously. Upon conducting a lawful stop, they found in his backpack a leather wallet containing documents and credit cards belonging to businessman Edward Montgomery, who had reported a theft hours earlier at Westfield Mall. The officers followed all protocols, and the defendant was caught in the act. The evidence is clear, and we request the maximum sentence for the crimes of theft and receiving stolen property. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The judge nodded and addressed the defense. "Mr. Johnson, your opening statement." Anthony rose calmly, adjusting his simple but impeccable suit. His posture conveyed confidence, but his eyes revealed the pain of a father seeing his son unjustly accused. "Your Honor, the defense will demonstrate that my client, Tyrone Johnson, is the victim of a serious injustice. My son is an exemplary student, partial scholarship recipient at his school for his academic performance, and has never been involved in any illegal activities. On the day in question, he was returning from basketball practice at school, a fact proven by numerous testimonies, including that of his physical education teacher. We will prove that the evidence was planted by the officers themselves, who have a history of similar conduct, and that Tyrone is innocent of all charges." The officers exchanged glances, slight discomfort perceptible on their faces. The prosecutor frowned. Accusations against police officers are serious, Counselor. I hope you have substantial evidence. I do, Counselor, more than you imagine. The testimonies began. First, businessman Edward Montgomery was called. A middle-aged man wearing an Italian suit and a gold watch. He reported how he had been robbed at the mall. I was leaving the store when I felt someone bump into me. I only realized my wallet was gone when I went to pay for parking. Were you able to see who bumped into you? Asked the prosecutor. Not clearly. It was a young guy. It happened very quickly. And this wallet, she showed the evidence in a plastic bag, is yours. Yes, it's mine. I recognize it by the wear on the right corner. When it was Anthony's turn to cross-examine, he approached calmly. Mr. Montgomery, my client was detained in Lincoln Heights at approximately 6:30 p.m. What time did you notice the theft? Around 5 p.m. when I went to pay for parking. And you went directly to the police station? Yes, I filed the police report immediately. Would you be able to identify the person who bumped into you? As I said, it was quick, but it was a young guy. Young like my son? The businessman looked at Tyrone, hesitant. It could be, but I'm not certain. Did you see my son at the police station after the supposed recovery of your belongings? No, I only recognized my wallet. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Next, the officers were called. First, Officer Peterson took the witness stand. A robust man, about 40 years old, with a severe expression. Officer Peterson, could you tell us what happened on March 15th? Asked the prosecutor. We were on routine patrol when we spotted the suspect exiting the Lincoln Heights metro station. He showed nervousness upon seeing the patrol car, which caught our attention. We proceeded with the stop following all protocols. During the search, we found the wallet in his backpack hidden among notebooks. And what did you do next? We placed him under arrest, read him his rights, and took him to the precinct. Was there any resistance? He tried to argue that he didn't know about the wallet, but there was no physical resistance. When Anthony stood up to cross-examine, the officer adjusted his posture, visibly more tense. Officer Peterson, you said my son showed nervousness. Could you specify what behavior led you to that conclusion? He quickened his pace when he saw us. My son was returning from basketball practice. Perhaps he was just in a hurry to get home. In our experience, when someone quickens their pace upon seeing the police, they're usually hiding something. In your experience, right, Officer Peterson, how many stops have you conducted in the last 6 months? I can't specify the exact number, approximately. Maybe about 200, 250. And of those 250 stops, how many resulted in arrests or seizures? Objection, intervened the prosecutor. Relevance? I'm establishing a pattern of conduct, Your Honor. Proceed, but be brief, ordered the judge. So, Officer Peterson, how many of your stops resulted in arrests? About 40, maybe. And of those 40, how many were black youths? The officer hesitated. I don't keep that kind of statistic. But you remember, don't you? After all, there aren't many considering the total number of stops. The majority, I suppose, but that just reflects the reality of the streets. I see. Officer Peterson, do you use a body camera during service? Not always. That day it wasn't working. How convenient. And your partner, Officer Mitchell, was also without a camera. Yes, we had a technical problem with the equipment. A technical problem. Officer Peterson, do you know Lawrence Fisher, also known as Red? The officer paled slightly. I don't recall. Curious, because Lawrence Fisher works as a parking attendant exactly in the area where you stopped my son. And he has an excellent memory. The prosecutor intervened again. Your Honor, the defense is clearly trying to intimidate the witness. Mr. Johnson, ask your questions directly, the judge warned. With all due respect, Your Honor, I'm merely establishing facts relevant to the case. Officer Peterson, have you and Officer Mitchell ever been investigated by Internal Affairs? Peterson swallowed hard. There have been some unfounded complaints. Unfounded complaints? Do you consider 5 investigations for abuse of authority and fabrication of evidence as unfounded complaints? The courtroom fell into absolute silence. The prosecutor looked uncomfortable, and the judge shifted in his chair. "Counselor, the officer's service record is not on trial here," said the judge. "Yes, it is, Your Honor, when that record demonstrates a pattern of conduct that repeats itself in my son's case. I request permission to call a defense witness who wasn't on the initial list." "Who would this witness be?" "Lawrence Fisher, the parking attendant who was present at the time of the stop and who recorded everything on his cell phone." The officers exchanged worried looks, and the prosecutor rose immediately. "Your Honor, this is irregular. The defense cannot present surprise witnesses." "Normally, I would agree, Ms. Foster, but given the circumstances and the gravity of the accusations made by the defense, I'll allow it. Let the witness enter." Lawrence Fisher was a man of about 50, thin, with graying hair and calloused hands. He wore a simple shirt and jeans. After taking the oath, Anthony began the questioning. "Mr. Fisher, where were you on the afternoon of March 15th, around 6:30 p.m.? "I was at the exit of the Lincoln Heights station, like always. I've been watching cars there for more than 10 years. "And did you witness the police stop of my son, Tyrone Johnson?" "Yes, sir. I saw everything." "Could you describe to the court what you saw?" "The kid was leaving the station with his backpack on. Then the patrol car stopped and the two officers got out, already shouting for him to put his hands against the wall. He obeyed right away. No trouble. They started searching his backpack, and I clearly saw when the taller officer took something from his own pocket and placed it among the kid's things. Then he made a surprised face, like he had just found it there." "Mr. Fisher, how can you be sure of what you saw?" "Because I recorded everything. I've seen these officers do this before, so whenever I see them stopping someone, especially if they're young and black, I record secretly." Anthony turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to present as evidence the video recorded by Mr. Fisher." The prosecutor stood up. "Objection. This video hasn't been examined by forensics. It could have been altered." "Your Honor," Anthony responded, "I have here a preliminary report from the Police Department's Technology Division confirming the authenticity of the video and the date of the recording. Additionally, I have with me a technician from the department who can testify to the integrity of the evidence." The judge, visibly disturbed by the turn of events, nodded. "I'll allow it. Present the video." The video was shown on a screen in the courtroom. The images were clear. They showed exactly what Lawrence had described. Officer Mitchell clearly took something from his pocket and placed it in Tyrone's backpack during the search. The room erupted in murmurs. The prosecutor looked pale. The officers, now visibly agitated, conversed among themselves in hushed tones. "Silence in the court," ordered the judge, hammering his gavel. "Mr. Johnson, do you have more witnesses?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Captain Mark Sullivan." A middle-aged man, wearing a discreet grey suit, entered the room. There was a seriousness in his gaze that silenced even the most persistent whispers. "Captain Sullivan, you are the current head of internal affairs for the Chicago Police Department, correct?" "Yes, I've been in that role for 3 years." "Do you know Officers Peterson and Mitchell?" "Unfortunately, yes. They are the subjects of multiple investigations by Internal Affairs. We've received numerous complaints about irregular stops and fabrication of evidence, especially involving young black men from underprivileged neighborhoods. And had you seen this video before?" "Not this specific one, but we have other videos showing similar conduct from these same officers. In fact, we had already initiated an internal investigation even before this case." The prosecutor, regaining her composure, intervened. "Your Honor, with all due respect, Mr. Johnson is clearly trying to shift the focus of his son's trial to alleged police irregularities that haven't been judicially proven." Anthony turned to the prosecutor, a serene expression on his face. "Ms. Foster, you built your entire case on these officers' statements. If they aren't reliable, if they planted evidence, then there is no case against my son. And these aren't alleged irregularities. The video clearly shows fabrication of evidence. Or are you going to ignore what we just saw?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. Before the prosecutor could respond, the courtroom door opened again. A woman entered, cautious but determined. It was Lisa Mitchell, Officer Mitchell's wife. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling but resolute, I need to testify. Officer Mitchell rose abruptly. What are you doing here? He hissed, his face contorted in a mixture of anger and fear. The judge hammered his gavel. Order in the court. Ma'am, who are you? I'm Lisa Mitchell, Officer Mitchell's wife, and I have crucial information about this case and several others. A stunned silence took over the room. The judge looked at the prosecutor and the defense, both equally surprised. Your Honor, said Anthony, recovering first from the shock, I request that Mrs. Mitchell be heard as a witness. This is absurd, protested Officer Mitchell, standing up. She can't testify against her own husband. Actually, she can, intervened Captain Sullivan. There's no legal impediment when it comes to reporting crimes. The judge, after a few seconds of deliberation, nodded. Mrs. Mitchell, approach. Do you understand that you will be under oath and that false testimony is a crime? Yes, Your Honor, and I'm aware of the consequences of what I'm about to do, but I can't live with this anymore. After taking the oath, Lisa sat down. She was a woman of simple appearance, with tired eyes that suggested sleepless nights. Mrs. Mitchell, Anthony began gently, why did you decide to come to court today? She took a deep breath, avoiding looking at her husband. Because I can't stand being complicit through my silence anymore. My husband and Officer Peterson have a scheme. They stop young men, mainly black and from underprivileged neighborhoods, plant evidence, and incriminate them. Then they extort money from families to resolve the problem. The room exploded in reactions. The judge hammered his gavel repeatedly, demanding order. Do you have proof of these accusations? Yes, I have recordings of conversations, deposit records, a list of victims. I gave everything to Captain Sullivan last night. That's why he's here today. She looked at her husband for the first time, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Brian, but I can't live like this anymore. Officer Mitchell seemed petrified, while Officer Peterson looked frantically around as if searching for an exit. Mrs. Mitchell, continued Anthony, was my son, Tyrone, on their list? Yes, but in a different way. Your son was to be used as an example. They knew you're a former police captain and an attorney. The idea was to incriminate your son and then offer to resolve the case in exchange for a large sum of money, knowing you would do anything to protect him. Anthony closed his eyes for a moment, containing the anger that threatened to overflow. And how did they choose the theft victim? They didn't. The wallet was really stolen, but not by your son. They simply took advantage of the opportunity. Officer Peterson has contacts with pickpockets at the mall. They keep the money and cards and hand over documents and wallets to the officers to use in situations like this. The prosecutor looked devastated. Her entire case was crumbling before her eyes. Your Honor, she said, rising slowly, in light of the new evidence, the state requests the withdrawal of all charges against Tyrone Johnson and asks for the immediate opening of an investigation against the officers involved. The judge nodded gravely. Granted, Tyrone Johnson is cleared of all charges. He turned to the officers. Officer Brian Mitchell and Officer James Peterson, you are under arrest for fabrication of evidence, perjury, abuse of authority, and extortion. Captain Sullivan, proceed with the arrest. Two internal affairs officers who were in the room approached the officers. Peterson tried to run but was quickly restrained. Mitchell, on the other hand, just lowered his head, defeated. Tyrone, still, not believing what he had just witnessed, looked at his father with tears in his eyes. The handcuffs were removed, and he was finally able to hug Anthony. Thank you, Dad, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Anthony just held his son tightly, silently thanking that he had arrived in time. But the story wouldn't end there. Outside the courthouse, reporters were eagerly waiting. The case was already circulating on social media, thanks to the video that Lawrence had shared even before the hearing. Mr. Johnson, do you think this is an isolated case, or does it reflect a systemic problem? Asked a reporter, approaching. A microphone. Anthony, with Tyrone by his side, answered with the calm and eloquence that characterized him. This is not an isolated case. My son was a victim of a system that urgently needs reform. How many innocent young men, without a father who's an attorney or without a video to prove their innocence, are unjustly incarcerated today? This is a call for us to look critically at our institutions and demand change. The report aired that same night, generating a wave of indignation on social media. In the following days, dozens of families began to come forward with similar stories involving the same officers. A week after the trial, Anthony received an unexpected call. It was Captain Sullivan. "Anthony, we need to talk. The case is much bigger than we thought. It's not just two corrupt officers, it's a network that involves detectives, prosecutors, and even a judge." "Maxwell Harrison?" asked Anthony, referring to the judge who presided over Tyrone's case. "Exactly. We discovered that he has dismissed dozens of complaints against Peterson and Mitchell in recent years, and he's not the only one. We're talking about a systematic operation of extortion and framing of innocence." Anthony felt a chill run down his spine. On social media, the hashtag #NotYourEverydayCourage became a trend, with people sharing stories of small acts of courage against injustices. A year passed. The reforms in Chicago's police system were advancing slowly, facing resistance from conservative sectors but progressing thanks to constant pressure from civil society and the media. The task force led by Mark Sullivan had become permanent, transforming into a specific department to investigate police abuses. Tyrone, now a freshman studying pre-law at the University of Chicago, divided his time between studies and volunteer work at a legal aid project for youth from underprivileged communities. His personal experience made him especially connected with the young people seeking help. On a Saturday afternoon, while attending at a community center in Southside, Tyrone received a 16-year-old boy, visibly nervous. "My name is Deshawn," said the boy, avoiding eye contact. "I was stopped by the police yesterday. They planted a small amount of something that looked like marijuana in my pocket. They said if my family doesn't pay $5,000 by Monday, they'll come to my house and take me to the station." Tyrone felt a tightness in his chest. Despite all the changes, the abuses continued, merely adapting to new circumstances. "Did you get any proof? Did anyone see? Are there any cameras in the area?" "I don't know. There were lots of people on the street, but nobody wants to mess with the police." Tyrone thought for a moment. "Deshawn, let's do this. Don't pay anything. I'm going to contact Internal Affairs right now and request a team to be on standby near your house on Monday. If they show up, they'll be caught in the act." The young man seemed terrified. "What if it goes wrong? They'll kill me." Tyrone put his hand on Deshawn's shoulder. "Trust me, I know exactly what you're feeling because I went through it. I know the fear, the powerlessness, the feeling that nobody will believe you. But things have changed. We have people on our side now." Reluctantly, Deshawn agreed to the plan. Tyrone immediately called Captain Sullivan and his father, explaining the situation. Both mobilized resources to protect the young man and catch the corrupt officers. On Monday, as predicted, 2 officers showed up at Deshawn's house. To their surprise, they were met by an internal affairs team. Caught in the act trying to extort the family, they were immediately arrested. The case generated a new wave of indignation and rekindled the debate about the need for body cameras on all officers and an independent oversight system. For Tyrone, it was confirmation that his path was correct. Each young person defended represented a small step toward real justice. One night, while studying for a criminal law exam, Tyrone received an unexpected message. It was from Brian Mitchell, the former officer now serving his sentence. "I know I have no right to speak to you, but I need to say something. I'm sorry. The system corrupted me gradually, until I became the monster I once swore to fight. Your courage and Lisa's made me see what I had become. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you changed at least one person." Tyrone stared at the message for long minutes, a whirlwind of emotions inside him. Finally, he replied, "Thank you for your words. I can't say I completely forgive you, but I believe in people's capacity to change. I hope you use your experience to help transform the system when you get out." He didn't expect a response, but it came quickly. "I've already started. I'm collaborating with internal investigations and giving remote talks to new officers about how corruption begins with small concessions. It doesn't erase what I did, but I hope it helps prevent new Brian Mitchells." The message brought a bittersweet smile to Tyrone's face. Real change happened like this, one heart at a time. 2 years after his trial, Chicago had implemented significant reforms: mandatory body cameras for all officers on duty, an independent oversight board with investigative power, and a program for reviewing suspicious cases that had already freed more than 300 people unjustly convicted. Tyrone, now in his 3rd year of pre-law and interning at the district attorney's office, was in his father's office when he received surprising news. "Son, I just found out. The state legislature has approved the Tyrone Johnson Act. From now on, any case of police stop without consistent evidence or independent witnesses will be automatically reviewed by a mixed commission formed by members of the district attorney's office, public defender's office, and civil society." Tyrone was speechless. His story, his suffering, had been transformed into concrete change. That March afternoon 3 years earlier, when he was unjustly detained, now seemed like the beginning of a journey greater than himself. "This will save many lives," he finally managed to say. He had left the police force years before precisely because he couldn't stand the internal corruption, opting to defend innocence as an attorney. Now he had the chance to make a real difference. "What do you need from me, Mark?" "Your experience as a police captain and your credibility as an attorney. We're assembling a task force to investigate all of this, and we want you leading the legal aspect. Plus, your case with Tyrone has generated national visibility. We can use that to pressure for real changes." Anthony looked at the room where Tyrone was studying, making up for lost time during his brief detention. The fear was still there, not just for what happened, but for what could have happened if he hadn't had the tools and knowledge to fight. "Count me in, Mark, but with one condition. I want immediate review of all cases involving these officers. We can't leave innocents in jail while we discuss bureaucracy. We've already started. In fact, we secured the release of 3 young men yesterday, all incriminated in a similar way to Tyrone." The news brought a smile to Anthony's tired face. It was just the beginning of a long battle, but each innocent released represented a victory against a corrupted system. In the months that followed, the task force led by Mark Sullivan and legally advised by Anthony revealed a network of corruption that extended through several institutions of Chicago's criminal justice system. Dozens of officers were suspended, 3 detectives were arrested, and Judge Maxwell Harrison resigned before being formally accused. More importantly, more than 50 unjustly convicted young men were freed after their cases were reviewed. Many had been victims of the same scheme: planted evidence, false testimonies, extortion of desperate families. For Tyrone, the experience transformed his worldview. Initially traumatized, he found purpose in his pain. With his father's support, he began participating in talks at schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, alerting young people about their rights during police stops. His story inspired many to report abuses previously silenced by fear. 6 months after the trial, Tyrone was in a packed auditorium at the University of Chicago Law School. Beside him, Anthony and Captain Sullivan participated in a panel on criminal justice system reform. "What impresses me most," said a criminal law professor, "is how Tyrone's case exposed flaws that many of us, academics, have been denouncing for years, but that never generated real changes. It took a video going viral on social media for authorities to take action." "That's precisely why we need to democratize access to justice," Anthony responded. "My son was lucky to have a father who's an attorney and a courageous witness who recorded everything. But what about the thousands of Tyrones across America who don't have that luck? How many are unjustly imprisoned at this very moment?" The audience applauded fervently. Among those present, Lisa Mitchell observed discreetly from the back of the auditorium. Her decision to report her own husband had cost her marriage and forced her to start her life over, but the weight that had been lifted from her shoulders and the lives she had helped save were worth every sacrifice. Tyrone, now having just turned 18, stood up to speak. His voice, once timid, now carried the confidence of someone who had discovered his purpose. "When I was on the defendant's bench, handcuffed and afraid, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine a future beyond those walls. Today, 6 months later, I'm here to say that moment didn't define me, but it defined what I want to do with my life." He looked at his father with admiration. "I've always admired my father's work as an attorney, but I never imagined following in his footsteps. Now, I officially announce that I'll be applying to college for pre-law. I want to fight so that other, young people like me have a voice in a system that frequently silences them." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Anthony, with tears in his eyes, embraced his son with pride. The road would be long and the barriers numerous, but each small victory represented hope for a more just system. As they left the event, a young reporter approached Tyrone. "Do you consider yourself a symbol of resistance now?" she asked, microphone in hand. Tyrone smiled, thoughtful. "I don't consider myself a symbol of anything. I'm just one among thousands who have suffered injustices. The difference is that my story became public. The true symbols of resistance are people like Lawrence, the parking attendant who risked his safety to record that video, or like Lisa, who had the courage to report her own husband. They are ordinary people doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. That's what we need more of, everyday courage." The response, broadcast nationally on the evening news, resonated widely. "And it's just the beginning," Anthony replied. "The Federal House Committee on Human Rights is using our model as the basis for a national law." That night, Tyrone went up to the rooftop of his building. Looking at the illuminated city, he felt the weight and beauty of his journey, from victim to symbol, from symbol to agent of change. The system was still deeply flawed, injustices were still numerous, but each small victory mattered. His phone vibrated with a message from Lawrence, the parking attendant who had recorded the video that saved him. Now Lawrence coordinated a network of community observers, residents trained to safely document police stops. "2 more officers caught today planting evidence. We're making a difference, son." Tyrone smiled at the starry sky. The fight continued day after day with everyday courage. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 5 years after the trial that changed his life, Tyrone Johnson, now a law school graduate working at the Public Defender's Office, stood before an audience at the Capitol. As a special guest at a public hearing on criminal justice system reform, he shared not just his personal story, but the concrete results of the changes implemented in Chicago. In the last 5 years, we've seen a 70% reduction in complaints of evidence fabrication by police officers in Chicago. Arrests for minor offenses have fallen by 50%, while the rate of solving violent crimes has increased. This proves what we've always advocated. Efficient public safety isn't achieved through abuse of power, but through intelligence and respect for fundamental rights. In the audience, Anthony observed his son with indescribable pride. Next to him, now Secretary of Public Safety for Illinois, Mark Sullivan, nodded in agreement. The transformation had been slow and faced resistance, but the results were undeniable. "The model we implemented in Chicago is ready to be nationalized," continued Tyrone. "The Tyrone Johnson Act isn't about me. It's about every young person who was or could be a victim of an unjust system. It's about transforming pain into concrete change." At the end of the hearing, while talking with legislators and activists, Tyrone was surprised by the approach of a figure he hadn't seen in years, Lisa Mitchell, Officer Mitchell's ex-wife. "Tyrone, it's good to see you," she said with a shy smile. "I came to attend the hearing because I also have news to share." "Lisa, what a wonderful surprise," he replied, embracing her with genuine affection. "What news is that?" "Brian is going to be released on parole next week. He served 5 years of his sentence and got a reduction for good behavior and collaboration with investigations. But most importantly, he's going to work in a rehabilitation program for former officers who want to contribute to system reform based on their own negative experiences." Tyrone was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. "How do you feel about that?" he finally asked. Lisa sighed, a mixture of emotions in her gaze. "We never got back together as a couple. The trust was irreparably broken. But over these years, I've seen a genuinely remorseful man who understood the devastating impact of his actions. He never asked me to forgive him, only to witness his change, and I've witnessed it." Do you think he really changed? I believe so. He helped identify dozens of other corrupt officers and extortion schemes. He wrote a manual on how to identify patterns of abusive behavior in police stations. And for the last 2 years, he's been giving remote lectures to police academies about police ethics. Tyrone pondered for a moment. I'd like to talk to him when he's released. Not out of revenge or resentment, but because I believe our intertwined stories can be powerful to inspire more change. I'm sure he'll be honored, replied Lisa. Your forgiveness means a lot to him, although he's never felt worthy of asking for it. That unexpected conversation brought Tyrone a new dimension of the impact of his story. It wasn't just about public policies, laws, or statistics. It was about human transformation at all levels. A week later, Tyrone visited Brian Mitchell at the Reintegration Center, where he would spend the first months of his parole. The meeting, initially tense, transformed into a deep conversation about redemption, responsibility, and the future of policing in America. I never imagined I'd be sitting here talking civilly with you, confessed Brian, now with gray hair and deep lines on his face. For years, I represented everything that's wrong with the system. And now? Asked Tyrone. Now I understand that my life will only have meaning if I dedicate each day to undoing the harm I caused, not just to you, but to dozens of other young men. You know what impresses me? How a single decision by you and Peterson that day changed so many lives, including your own. Brian nodded, thoughtful. Corruption begins with small concessions. First you accept a free coffee, then a lunch, then a small bribe. And before you realize it, you're planting evidence and destroying lives. It's a slippery slope. And how can we prevent that in the future? By changing police culture from the academy, implementing rigorous supervision, but mainly improving working conditions and salaries. An officer who feels valued and respected is less vulnerable to corruption. At the end of the conversation, Tyrone extended his hand to Brian, not in complete forgiveness, but in recognition of human complexity and the possibility of redemption. Let's work together, proposed Tyrone. Your experience as a former officer and former inmate, combined with my legal perspective and experience as a victim, can be powerful in transforming police training. Brian accepted the extended hand with contained emotion. It would be an honor, and a way to begin to repair the irreparable. In the years that followed, the joint work of Tyrone and Brian transformed into an innovative police training program, initially adopted in Chicago and later in other states. Humanized and efficient policing combined advanced investigation techniques with a strong emphasis on human rights and community trust building. The results were surprising. Reduction in rates of police violence, increased cooperation of communities with investigations, and significant improvement in the public image of participating police forces. 10 years after the trial that changed his life, Tyrone Johnson, now a respected human rights attorney and university professor, was in the audience of a special ceremony. His father, Anthony Johnson, was receiving the Merit Medal from the National Council of Justice for his contribution to the reform of the American judicial system. When I became an attorney, more than 30 years ago, Anthony said in his speech, I believed that justice was mainly done in courtrooms. Today I know that it is built daily, on the streets, in police stations, in communities. True justice is not a place we arrive at, but a path we walk together. He looked directly at Tyrone in the audience. My son taught me the most important lesson of my career, that our personal wounds can be transformed into collective healing. What happened to him could have consumed us in bitterness and vengeance. Instead, we transformed it into fuel for change. The audience gave a standing ovation. Among those present were many of the young men who had been unjustly accused by corrupt officers and later freed thanks to the work of the task force. Each had a story of rebuilding after trauma, many pursuing careers in law, social work, or politics. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached Tyrone. After everything that happened, if you could go back in time and avoid your unjust arrest, would you? Tyrone thought for a moment, a slight smile forming on his face. That's a difficult question. No one wishes to go through the trauma I went through. But if my experience hadn't occurred, how many other Tyrones would continue to suffer in silence? Sometimes our most painful wounds become our greatest purposes. I can't say I'm happy to have gone through that, but I'm at peace with the greater meaning we found in the suffering. That night, gathered at Anthony's home to celebrate the award, were many of the characters who had been part of that journey of transformation. Mark Sullivan, now a respected international consultant in police reform. Lawrence, the parking attendant who had become coordinator of a citizen police monitoring project. Lisa, director of an NGO supporting families of police officers, and even Brian, who now dedicated his life to training new officers. Looking at that unlikely group, Tyrone felt a deep gratitude. The system still had much to improve. Justice still failed more than it should. But each person in that room represented a small victory against indifference and corruption. "I propose a toast," said Anthony, raising his glass. "Not to the end of the journey because it continues, but to each step taken with courage and integrity. To everyday courage," added Tyrone, repeating the phrase that had become the motto of his work. The glasses clinked, and in that simple moment was the essence of everything they had fought for. The possibility of transformation, hope renewed with each act of courage, no matter how small. As the night progressed, Tyrone went out to the balcony, contemplating the lights of Chicago. He remembered the frightened young man he had been, handcuffed and hopeless, and the man he had become. The scars remained, but they had transformed into strength. His phone vibrated, a message from Deshawn, the young man he had helped years ago. Now with a degree in social work, Deshawn coordinated a psychological support project for young victims of police violence. "Professor, I just found out the project was approved. We're going to expand to 3 more communities starting next month. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Tyrone smiled at the starry night. True change happened like this, one life at a time, one system at a time, one heart at a time. And despite all the challenges that still persisted, there were reasons for hope. The next day, Tyrone would enter a classroom full of law students. He would look at those idealistic young people and transmit the most important lesson he had learned in his journey, that real justice isn't just in codes and statutes, but in the courage to face injustices, in the empathy to recognize others' suffering, and in the determination to transform indignation into concrete action. And so, from a story of injustice, was born a legacy of transformation that would continue far beyond that courtroom where everything began. Because some stories don't end, they only transform into new beginnings. End of story. So what did you think of Tyrone's journey? How would you react in his place? Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel to follow other exciting stories of overcoming and social transformation. Your support motivates us to continue sharing narratives that make a difference.